Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Welcome back. Let's go and continue.
So, in addition to these comments on my YouTube channel, you can also find other. Uh, some people like making videos, and the purpose of the video is to attack. Honestly, attack videos. And even in the field of religion. I saw one just the other day. There's a Tibetan Buddhist, actually a Tibetan Buddhist with an American accent, but doesn't mean anything. I think the person has studied properly. Perhaps they studied in India. I don't know her. I don't think anyone studies in Tibet. China won't allow it. But you know that in India there are many Tibetan settlements. And they have ashrams, monasteries, and Westerners go there to study, like in Darjeeling, where Dalai Lama lives. No, not Darjeeling, Dharamshala, thank you. See, I just made a mistake. Okay. Anyway, this Tibetan Buddhist sounds very intelligent. He makes what was the title of his Buddhism? The title of his video was, I just lost it. Where is that? Here it is. His title was, "Don't Be a Non-Dual Zombie." I must be a non-dual zombie. It was all about, actually it was all about non-critical thinking. It was about this blind faith. And of course, in really non-dual teachings like those of Shankara is anything but against questions. It encourages questions. Anyway, just to give you an idea of an attack video, there are many. You'd be surprised. Christians attack each other in videos all the time. Different Christians in different groups attack each other. They're vicious. They're really, anyway. And Hindus aren't immune to attack videos. Some of you know of this Zakir Naik, Dr. Zakir Naik. Famous. He is a Muslim scholar who often attacks not just Hindus. He'll attack almost anything, but definitely he'll attack Hindus and Hinduism. And just an interesting statistic for you. He has 4 million subscribers on his channel, which is approximately 20 times as much as mine. So whose voice has more impact? So here he is, really flat out attacking Hindu culture. Now, this leads to a tricky situation. Excuse me. And the tricky situation is this. I've been speaking now for half an hour about not arguing. Should we not argue with those who attack Hinduism?
I'd say you debate as opposed to argue, but some people would assume debate and argument as one and the same because you are attacking their argument. But the difference between arguing with them and debating with them is what you are attacking. Are you attacking them or are you attacking their argument? But a lot of people see their argument as themselves, so when you attack their argument, they see you as attacking themselves. Which I can understand because you have your values and your values are in your arguments. And if they're attacking your arguments, they're attacking your values and they're attacking you. But you have to kind of try to separate that. Yes, you are your values, but at the same time, you are not your values. Obviously, in Advaita Vedanta, you're none of those. But you get my point, though.
Complicated. If we ignore attacks on Hinduism, aren't we violating the principle of ahimsa by allowing Hindus and Hindu traditions to be attacked? If we're passive, if we don't respond to those attacks, if we remain silent. So, not engaging with these attacks on Hinduism is, I believe this strongly, against the principle of dharma in general and ahimsa in particular. To allow your best friend to be abused by someone, is that dharmic? To allow abuse? Absolutely not. You get the message. But now, to make things more complicated, to engage those who fight against Hinduism, to engage in verbal warfare with them, is also a dharma. If you resort, and this is what happens, when they resort to disinformation and personal attacks, all of which are harmful, as we said at the outset, and then suppose you, not you literally, but you figuratively, if you respond with your own
Personal
disinformation and your own personal attacks.
Essentially, basically, when you make an argument, make sure it's not coming from a personal perspective, but based on facts, or based on evidence, or even based on personal experience. Again, everyone's personal experience is valid to themselves, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's valid throughout the entire world. So how I experience something, let's say drinking the water, how I experience drinking water and versus how you experience drinking the water, it's not always going to be the same, but that doesn't make it less true for me, and it doesn't make it more true for you. But again, personal experience is can be shown as statistics. When everyone has a very positive personal experience on something, it generally means that it has a positive outlook on people who were to experience that. Again, it's statistical fact, but every individual case is a was it an antidote? I believe that's the right word for it. Every individual case is not exactly relevant, but collectively it is. Now, individual case is relevant to the individual, and to when you do one-on-one talks with people, it's relevant.
Oh, this Dr. Zakir Naik is, he's like you start attacking the person, you start attacking the ideology, you start giving disinformation. This is what goes on in Washington, goes on in courtrooms, goes on in your living room, and goes on in YouTube and social media and in the mainstream media. It goes on everywhere. Our level of discourse when it comes to argument, the bar, so to speak, has really come down low. I think sociologically it must go up and down. I suspect there are times when it might even have been lower than it is today.
Doubt it.
But today it's quite low. The bar, so to speak, meaning what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And what is acceptable in this discourse is almost anything. Disinformation is acceptable. Disinformation is a nice way of describing lies. Disinformation is lies. Putting spin on things is not exactly the same as disinformation. People put spin on. If you look at the media, the left-leaning media puts one spin on, the right-leaning media puts the other spin on. I wish these two spins would cancel themselves out, but that's not how it works.
Well, and this is the reason why you watch both, kind of like the left and the right, to kind of get the middle answer, you could say. I'm the same with him. I wish there was just a pretty central news media that is unbiased, that we can trust. But it's obviously it's run by humans, and humans have agendas, and humans have biases. So it's going to be very hard to even a known central news media to be completely unbiased. Is going to be a little bit hard. But yeah, that's the reason why you watch. You don't just watch one news media; you have to watch the other as well to get a balanced perspective.
So we are all subject to this bias in the media on both sides, equally on both sides, equally on both sides. So, how to live in such a world and deal with all of this bias in the media and in social media, and in particular, how to deal with attacks on Hinduism. Plenty. Not just in social media. In academia, there's plenty. And in Indian universities, there's plenty of attacks on Hinduism.
I'll say this though, at least in America, I'm sure it happens, but I will say I don't see it as much as say Christianity, because obviously this is mostly a Christian nation, and much like most, I guess most of the world, or let me just say the western part of the world, there's heavy criticism in the whatever happens to be the majority of the country. So this being a mostly Christian nation, there's heavy criticism to it, and a lot of protections going on to other religions, especially like Islam and stuff. So where things that Christians would do is or things that Christian would do is unacceptable, but if it's the same in Islam, it is acceptable, only because Christians are considered to be in power, so therefore whatever they do is unacceptable, even though say an Islam person would do the exact same thing, or just a Buddhist or a Hindu person. Um, but I've not really honestly heard attacks on Hinduism, at least where I'm at, and from the news I've seen. I have seen from Christians, but again, it's not as much. But I've heard of those. I've not personally seen them. I've seen them on YouTube and stuff. So again, I wouldn't doubt there are attacks on all religions, but how common it is, I don't think it's very common, but I don't see it. There's other issues that are pretty prominent, more so than religion, except for the Christian religion, because Christian is the primary religion in the United States, so it is attacked. And I wouldn't doubt it to be whatever major religions are going on around the world. Those religions are being attacked internally by the opposite faction, I guess you could say, because they see this as this religions are generally speaking as not accepting of others, and therefore they want to attack it.
Social media, we've already described. Mainstream
Mm.
media, again, these twists, these spins, left or right, anything and everything can be distorted and gets distorted. So, how to defend something of great value? What is of great value, of course, is your own religious and spiritual traditions. We've already said that to fail to defend it is adharmic, but to enter into verbal warfare to defend it is also adharmic. What is the solution? The solution I'll share with you doesn't seem to be very popular, but it sure does seem to be reasonable. And that solution is, actually, the broader topic is how to argue. How about we start there? How to argue.
I want to get good at that. I know a lot of things, and sometimes I make good points, but I'm terrible at arguments, I suppose. I guess argue is not the right word, but debate. I would have loved to have been in a debate team, I guess, because I think I make good points, but I don't know how to be a good debater per se. Because I watch again a lot of things on YouTube with like discussions and stuff, and a lot of people are bringing up all these weird, all these things that are kind of psychological, that are kind of faults in our arguments, and I don't know all of it, and I know I make those same faults, and I don't want to. So so yeah,
The first step is the most surprising and most overlooked step
to be
in an
honest.
argument, and that step is listen.
Oh,
This is like the people who comment on my videos without watching them. Watch them first and then give a comment. Here, the stereotypical, I'm sure you've seen comics that this person is shouting at this person is shouting at this person, they're both shouting at each other. Who's listening? No one. What kind of communication takes place if both are shouting and no one is listening? Step one of any argument, listen. Because they may not be making a point that you agree with, but they are representing, well, I'm talking about your opponent, and let's be specific, someone who's attacking Hinduism. Someone who's attacking Hinduism, of course, you might feel emotionally offended, but if being emotionally offended leads you to get so angry, then you go on shouting and not listening. There's a first problem. Secondly, about listening. The person who's arguing may have a lot of flaws in their reasoning, probably do, but they are legitimately representing how they feel. Interesting. The factual content of what they're saying could be all bogus, but the emotional content of what they're saying is 100% real. Shouldn't you hear that? Shouldn't you understand, even if their arguments are ridiculous, shouldn't you make an effort to understand how they feel?
the problem with that is the fact that some of the arguments are just so ridiculous. It's like, how did it even come to this point? There's a saying that you cannot reason with people who didn't reason themselves into their own arguments. I said it in a longer way, but you cannot reason with people who didn't reason themselves in their position. Basically, they got into their position not because they thought it through. They just got in their position because of emotional whatever, or things that are not reasonable, I guess. Whatever that is, emotion, I guess. So it feels right, so therefore they'll make that argument instead of thinking things through, saying, okay, let's see what this argument is, and let's think it out and see what is the problem. And even then, whenever you do listen to them, they don't listen back. So it's just a one-sided argument, not conversation and not debate. And whenever you give them good facts or arguments, they'll just start name calling because they have no arguments, because obviously they didn't reason it through, because they just felt like arguing that point because it felt good.
That's the first step of an argument. You listen. While you listen, you hear the arguments, some of which might be legitimate, many of which may be illegitimate. But in addition to that, you pay attention to how they feel. Because if there's any hope in resolving the argument, that hope lies not in addressing the logical faults made in the argument. Hope might be found in addressing how the person feels. And often people feel afraid. They feel attacked. And this, I didn't plan to talk about this, just two minutes on this, because it's such an important topic.
Very much true. Obviously, And again, going back to what I said a little bit earlier, where their ideas, their how to say, their values, if their values are based on feelings, it's going to be, it was going to feel like a personal attack because it's not based on reason or logic. When you use reason and logic, you can still feel attacked, but you can also hopefully within your reason and logic understand that these are debates not meant to necessarily attack you unless the person is legitimately attacking you. Other than that, it's meant to question your ideas, question your values and whatnot, which I do all the time. Well, do I say I do it all the time? Maybe not all the time, but I used to do it all the time. And once I've established a lot of values, I still do put them to the test whenever I can. But if I can't make arguments for them, I'm not going to sit there and try to necessarily, because that's just a waste of energy and a waste of time in some sense. But I do put my values to the test, and I argue my own values to myself, obviously, because whenever I can discuss them with people, I hope that someone can destroy them, and if they can't, or to try to destroy them, and if I can back it up, then it just reinforces my value. If they can destroy it, then I'm like, okay, I have to rethink about my values again. And again, sometimes it feels personal, but we have to recognize that it's usually not, especially when it's coming from people you know, or someone coming with good faith arguments.
Muslims around the country, around the world, many more of the more traditional, more orthodox, and I know there are different groups of Muslims, we all know that. But the ones who are more traditional, more conventional, more orthodox, they feel attacked by Western culture, by modernity, by everything they see that is opposed to their cultural norms. Of course, they express their arguments in a religious and theological way, but bottom line is you can't generalize anything, but many feel attacked, they feel threatened, they feel afraid. When we focus on the content of what they say and ignore how they feel, we're making a mistake. There's that first step of listening. So what they say, you don't want to hear what they say, because it's all, if you're not Muslim, you're a kafir and all of this stuff, and jihad, all of this dogmatism and theology, they just pump it out at you and you get turned off. And I understand that. I understand why you would feel turned off by that. But why not make a little further effort to understand how they feel? Go beyond the dogmatism, go beyond the theology, go beyond the quotations from Quran. This applies equally to Christians and other groups as well. To understand, in the general principle, when you're in an argument, don't just pay attention to the details of the argument, but the emotional aspect of the argument is equally important. That's step one, listening, to really understand their perspective. Step two is respond. You have a right to respond. They have a right to their opinion. You have a right to your opinion. And if they're expressing things that are harmful to your religious tradition and practices and spirituality, then you have a moral duty to respond. But respond how? We've already talked about some of the problems in arguing. So if someone is attacking the ideology of Hinduism, for example, many gods, and they go on attacking this many gods thing, that's called an attack on ideology. So then, if your response is to attack the ideology of Islam. You see the point? So if they are attacking your ideology, instead of responding by a similar attack, remember something called mutually assured destruction during the Cold War? We're not going there. Anyway, it's fighting like boys in the sandbox. Here's the point. If they are attacking your ideology, you don't have to attack theirs. Why not? You defend your ideology. That would make a lot more sense. Because in criticizing many gods, for example, then they obviously don't understand the essence of the Hindu tradition, which is not polytheistic at all. But they don't understand that. The point I'm making, though, is if they attack your ideology and you attack theirs, you just get into the shouting match. If they attack your ideology and your response is to defend your ideology, that's a proper argument. If they attack, suppose they use a lot of misinformation. That's something that you can address. So if they misrepresent something, you can give a correct representation without attacking. Here's the problem. If someone gives misinformation and then you turn it into an opportunity for a personal attack, how can you say that? Didn't you ever learn things properly? Are you an idiot or what? This is normal. This is what's been normalized in our culture. This is a problem. Anyway, the point I'm making is when you hear disinformation, if your response is to attack the person who's spouting the disinformation, that's not helping anything, even if they attack you personally. If they attack you as a person and you respond by attacking them as a person, it's back to the two boys in the sandbox hitting each other. So if they respond with disinformation, you have a responsibility to try to correct that information. And the next step, so we've given 2 steps. There's one more. First step, listen. And listen not just to the arguments, listen to the underlying emotions. Why are they making these arguments?
So the problem is, I guess, would be hopefully the person that you're arguing with will listen, and that they're willing to look up information that would contradict their own. Most people who make these arguments, probably especially if it doesn't make sense, tend to live in a bubble, and they get their information from what someone else says. And I'm sure whoever that person is got their information based on how someone feels. So therefore, if they feel this way, it must be true. As in, it's the truth, not something that's it's an objective truth as opposed to a subjective truth. How individual people feel is subjective. How people are treated is objective. And you don't base it on one individual person. Objectively, that one person feels this way or is treated this way, but objectively, not everyone of that person or person of whatever type they are treated that way.
Step 2 is respond to the issues. Don't respond with personal attacks. Don't respond in like. If they attack your ideology, don't attack theirs exactly. So you respond in a reasonable and measured way. But if they're shouting, do you need to shout? If they're really worked up and angry, do you need to get worked up and angry? To be honest, the more worked up and angry you become, the less effective you will be in making your points. Okay, final part, step 3. Step 3, perhaps one of the most important parts, and that is stop. It's over. Because the other person is not going to be won over by your reason and kindness and your absence of attacks, the other person is not going to, oh, now I get it. Never in a million years will that happen. To go on, what do they call tit for tat? Just to go on, like the two boys in the sandbox. Or the two, not wrestlers, boxers. One, you get hit, you hit back. Hit back. Hit back. Not just useless. In fact, the main thing we've said all the way through here. It's harmful, not just to the other person, harmful to you. This is ahimsa. Not to subject others to harm, not to subject yourself to harm. If you don't stop, what will be the outcome? You won't win the argument, that's for sure. If it's about somebody attacking Hinduism, you won't win that argument. But if you go on arguing and arguing and arguing, are you really going to change the way the person thinks? It's unlikely, very unlikely. In some cases, if it looks possible, absolutely. Sadly, that's not generally the case. Which means then if you proceed to argue, hit, tit for tat, etc., the outcome is more and more harm to you and the other person. You both get, I won't say emotionally injured, but you both get increasingly frustrated, increasingly angry, increasingly hurt, and it serves no good purpose whatsoever. So, so third step was stop, and my note here says I should also stop my lecture. And we don't want to go on and on about this. But anyway, there's an important take-home message here, and that is, how do you handle arguments? Especially arguments that are attacking Hinduism, but not just arguments attacking Hinduism, any kind of argument. So those 3 steps are, as I said, they're not popular steps because no one follows them. No one follows step 1. Listen. No one follows step 2, to argue fairly, without disinformation, without ideological attacks, without ad hominem attacks, attacking the person. So step 2, no one follows. And step 3, no one follows. They go on arguing. So these are 3 steps that can really transform any argument you get into. And some of it is, I don't need to say how important it is if you're like, the arguments that take place in your living room, or arguments that take place in your workplace, at work. If you don't handle those arguments well, they're pretty nasty consequences. At home, at the workplace, wherever it is where these arguments go on. So this is an important application of the principle of ahimsa, the principle of ahimsa being the central doctrine of Hindu Dharma. What does it mean to be a pious, dharmic Hindu? Let me use that term. What does it mean to be a dharmic Hindu? It means ahimsa, don't cause harm. And now we know, don't cause harm in the form of arguments. Even if you're 100% in the right, you can still cause a lot of harm, correct?
I was going to say
You're
that.
arguing from a standpoint of being right, from a standpoint of righteousness, fine. But you can still cause harm. Okay, enough said.
I would say that's kind of weird, though. I guess because it's my perspective in life, where, I mean, I have to recognize that if someone makes a great argument and they're right and I'm wrong, I have to recognize that. I can't get offended by that, because if that person makes a great argument, it's a great argument and there's nothing else to it. I was wrong. But, obviously we're human beings and we get emotional. We always want to be right, but we can't always be right.
It says stop. So third step, stop. All right. So let me make some concluding comments here so you can go out and enjoy your lunch. First of all, I want to thank everyone who has helped, not just with this program, but with everything in the ashram. Everything here is coordinated by my assistant, Vasanti, and grateful to Vasanti. She's assisted by our 3 co-managers, Pinky Patel, Suresh Singh, and Jim Parmenter. So let us thank all of them. You may be grateful. I'm far more grateful, because they relieve me of having to deal with all this management stuff. So I'm more free now to teach and to, I've been working a lot on these videos, which is also teaching. So I'm especially grateful to all of them. Let's thank all of the volunteers who, under Gopi's guidance, who got everything ready for this program and who stay back after classes on Saturday to clean up everything. Thank you all.
Okay, I think this might be just thank yous.
The lovely trail. You can go for 5 or...
Okay. Okay. So anyway, I was thinking like harmful versus dharmic arguments. I was looking dharmic and dispute also at the title. So, I mean, no matter what, even if you're like you said, even if you're in the right, almost no matter what you say, even in defense, will cause harm, because you're attacking their arguments, not necessarily the fact that you're attacking them. So for me, honestly, again, intent matters a lot. If you intend to be truthful and honest, then whether you're attacking them or not, whether you're attacking their arguments or not, I I would say you're in the green. You're good, because your intent is not to harm people, because you have no control over how people feel. You have control over what you say, and if what you say is true and right, they're probably going to be harmed either way. But at least, for me, in my opinion, is that at least you've given them the truth. Again, hopefully you've given them the truth and not disinformation, as Swami Tadatmananda here has said. But if you gave them the truth, then you, in my opinion, you're clear. You're clear of conscience. So I would hopefully say that you would not accumulate any negative karma, because you are genuinely telling the truth. You're not attacking the person personally. You are countering their argument because they have misinformation, and you are giving them the correct information. And giving them the correct information may be harmful to them, because they see that as an attack on their own person or their own information, or, and again, to them sometimes their information is their own person at the same time, because that's their arguments is who they are. So, but you being genuine, honest, and truthful, I'd say no matter what you say, you may cause harm to them, but no negative karma, because your intent is not to harm. Your intent is to correct the misinformation, to remove ignorance from someone. So, I wouldn't say, obviously there's a ways to deliver the information, and that's where you have to be careful. That's where I think it matters quite a bit. But and that can be quite tricky. And most of the time it shouldn't be, honestly, but sometimes it can be. But anyways, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. It's the fact that, I agree with what he says, but also I disagree to some degree. That I think you should be able to make arguments, of course, non-personal arguments. I do believe you can say, like, if they say anything misinformation, you can correct them on that. And I think you should also not say misinformation and ensure that whatever facts you say is actual facts and statistics. Again, it doesn't have to be the entire population of all the Hindus in America or in whatever country you're at, but you can do like facts on your own ashram or own place, whatever it may be, saying I can't speak for. And this is your argument. Like I can't speak for all ashrams, but in my ashram we don't do that, or we do that. You know, so and you maybe your arguments like in traditional, or maybe this is you can say like, well, in traditional Hinduism or traditional Advaita Vedanta, that is not something that is accepted, or that is something that is accepted. So again, you can make factual arguments that are not generally for like I guess the general religion or how do I say a philosophy or a way of life. So nice. That's my reaction to harmful versus dharmic arguments. If you like my content, please consider subscribing to the sound down below. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next vid.